I maxed out all of my gear in a little over a month and still have tens of thousands of Lucent left over without spending any money whatsoever on the game. Now, when people see this on stream, they usually assume that either I got really lucky with drops, or I'm being fed gear by my guild, or I'm playing a ton of different alts, or I made all this money in the first week of the game when the prices were higher. I'm going to prove that none of that is true, and I'm going to show you guys everything I do to make Lucent and how you can do the same thing. Now, one caveat to all this is that I am playing the NA East early access servers, where the prices do tend to be higher than the launch servers or the Europe servers, but you have to remember that goes in both directions. Lower prices mean that you make less money, but it also means that you have to spend less money to get your gear. So what I'm going to show you will work in any server and in any market. Let's start off with some receipts so you guys can know this is legit. Over the past week, I have made 5.6k Lucent after taxes. If we look at the week before, I made 7k Lucent after taxes, and I'll just let this scroll all the way through so that you guys can see none of these items are field boss drops, which means this does not have anything to do with getting a super lucky drop or with getting gear fed to me by my guild. Even if my guild did get a drop and sell it, it would not show here. It would show in my mail. So this total is just from selling regular drops that anyone can get with or without a guild. And then finally, we'll go 1 week before that. And I have a screenshot here of me making 7.4k Lucent after taxes. And that was also over the course of about a week. So there you have it, 20k Lucent after taxes just in the last 3 weeks. All of this done on one character and without any assistance needed from my guild. So let's dive into the guide. We're going to start off by talking about how you sell items in Throne. Then we're going to talk about what to sell. And then we're going to talk about how I'm getting so many items to sell to begin with. So starting off, you're going to notice that the vast majority of the items that you loot in this game are not inherently sellable. And there's two ways that we can change that. We can either convert gear into traits, or we can convert gear into recipes. And so to convert it into a trait, I need to use these trait extraction stones. I click on this trait extraction button. This will destroy the item and give me a trait that I can sell in the market. If you want to know more about traits and how this system works, which ones to look out for, I recommend you check out part 1 of my trait guide. It'll give you a really good foundation there. For the other method, turning the item into a recipe, we would use this lithograph function. This is going to require enchanted ink along with some other materials in order to get the blank lithograph that is needed. And so in this case, since I'm turning a piece of armor into a recipe, I would go to the armor vendor and I would make this blank lithograph for armor, and then I would use that to convert this from a full piece of gear into a sellable recipe, and then I would be able to list this recipe on the market so that someone else could craft it and get this piece. You're going to be pretty limited on how many of these extraction stones and ink you can acquire. So every time you see an opportunity to get these, you're going to want to make sure you take advantage of that. You can buy them weekly from the contract coin merchant. If there's an event going on, such as the Halloween events right now, often you can get them from the event merchants. And then you also want to keep an eye on the Battle Pass Star Shop and the Ornate Coin Shops as consistent methods that you can acquire more of these. Almost all of the money that you're going to make is going to come from either those extractions or those lithographs, but this is a bit confusing because when you open the market, you're going to see all these completely intact sellable items, and so where are those coming from? If the item has the name of a field boss in it, like Cornelius or Nirma, Azrael, these are all weapons that drop directly from the field boss that they're named for, and these will drop automatically with this sellable border. So if you get one of those, basically you won the lottery, you can choose what to do with it, you can sell it. If you're in a guild, your guild decides what happens to it. So make sure when you join a guild, you agree with whatever their loot distribution rules are, if you want to keep the piece for yourself or if you guys roll for it or however you want to do it. And then the other thing that you'll see is items like this Heroic Blade of the Resistance. This doesn't drop from a field boss. The reason why it's sellable is because it is the result of a great success when crafting. And so what that means is that somebody bought the Heroic Blade of the Resistance lithograph, they crafted the item, and then whenever you craft a piece of gear, there's a 20% chance that it becomes a great success. If that happens, then the item will be sellable in its entirety. There is some strategy of buying lithographs and gambling for great successes in order to sell them for profit. However, it's very difficult to do, especially with the 22% tax rate, and you're not really going to be able to do it consistently. It's not a method that I've used to make any of my Lucent, but it is something to keep in mind if you're feeling lucky or if you want to try to scour the market and look for opportunities where that might be possible. And then the other sellable items are going to be these precious gems. You'll get these when you're running your Abyssal dungeons and things like that. I usually hold on to the Emirates and the Stalins because I need these to make armor and accessory lithographs. But I will sell the rubrics because weapon lithographs are usually not worth making. They require extra ink, and usually the margins on them are pretty thin. And then I'll sell the Marins as well. You can vendor these for SOLLANT, so if you're really hard up on SOLLANT, you can vendor those, but otherwise I would probably sell these for Lucent instead. And then finally, food follows the same rules as crafting gear. So if you're doing cooking and you get a great success while crafting, you can sell that food on the market. I haven't delved into this a ton, but there are some good opportunities to make Lucent here if you decide to level up your cooking and put all these ingredients together, do the farming and put the effort in. There's definitely some reward to be had for that. So we've established that most of your income is going to come from trade extraction or lithographing. However, you're only going to be able to do that a limited number of times each week. That means the next thing to learn is going to be which items to sell. Now, the minimum price that we can sell anything on the market is going to be 10 Lucent. And so when it comes to trade extraction, any green trait that we can sell is going to be worth selling. A 10-to-1 ratio on your trade extraction stones is very good. In fact, I would even say that a 2-to-1 ratio, which is what you get for selling a blue item for 10 Lucent, I would say this is pretty good and worth doing. If you're very low on extraction stones, like if you have 100 or less stones, then you can be a little bit more greedy and try to go for higher prices. But if you've got several hundred extraction stones, then a 2-to-1 ratio is probably good enough, and a 10-to-1 ratio is definitely good enough. So any green trait that sells at all, there's not that many of these left, but take a look at accessory greens or like max health on chest comes to mind. There's a few of these that you might still be able to sell for 10 Lucent, although most of these are at the point now where they're probably unsellable. With blues, it's a much more mixed bag. There are some blue traits that are flooded at 10 Lucent and you can't sell them, but there are a lot of traits that even though they have hit that bottom price of 10 Lucent, people are still buying them at that price for a variety of reasons. So a lot of this just comes down to searching the market and seeing what that looks like. If we want to deduce whether an item is going to sell, there's some context that the market gives us that we can use to figure that out. So if I look at these mirror turbines that I have in my inventory, if I want to decide if I'm going to extract these, I click on the extracts, and then right away, just from this screen right here, I can see that none of these top 4 have any chance of selling. There's thousands of these listed, so unless I get really lucky and someone just happens to click on mine, it's probably just going to expire over and over again, and I'm never going to be able to sell that. But these 2 at the bottom here, first of all, I can see that the prices are above 10 Lucent, so already I know that if I undercut this and, list one of these cooldowns for 24, or I list one of these magic evasions for 10, then it's going to sell. But if I look at another similar piece like these mirror handguards, we can use the context of this sale list here to see, okay, well, these are listed at 10, but there's only 20 of these, 18 of these. So these are probably selling even though they're minimum price. And if I click on these, I can look at the time remaining. The default time is about 3 days. So this one's been up for like 15 hours already. Maybe it's going to sell, maybe it's not. I kind of have to look at the total listings and the timers and try to judge for myself if this is worth taking a chance on. Again, a lot of this just comes with practice. Once you've been selling items in the game for a few weeks, you'll start to recognize which items there's a market for and which items are probably duds. But we want to use that time remaining, that sales price, the total number of listings, all the context that we can get from this market screen to kind of make a smart guess about whether or not that item can at least sell for that minimum price of 10. And then since I'm going for a 2-to-1 ratio on my blues, I want to aim for at least a 2-to-1 ratio on my purples as well. In the future, if blues become just completely unsellable across the board, like maybe a couple months from now when there's new gear in the game, then we might have to reduce that ratio down even below 2-to-1. But for now, I'm going to aim for 2-to-1. And since it's 25 stones to extract a purple, that means my minimum sale price for a purple is going to be 50 Lucent. And so pretty straightforward. I see a purple item. I look that item up on the market and I see if it's going to sell for 50 or not. In the case of this tome, Wildkin damage bonus only sells for 19. And so that's why it is sitting there in my inventory instead of being listed on the market. Now, let's say I loot an item and it doesn't have a trait that's worth extracting, but the item itself might still be worth selling as a lithograph. And so how do we figure out if that's going to be worth doing? And the first thing that we need to understand here is that these lithographs have a cost associated with them besides just the ink. They have an actual Lucent cost as well. And so earlier I mentioned how I sell all my rubrics and my Marins, but I keep the Emirates and the Stalins. I'm going to need 5 Emirates or 5 Stalins to do an accessory or an armor lithograph. And so we can think about that as like a 35 or a 40-ish cost of Lucent when it comes to turning that item into a lithograph. So I need to subtract that cost off of the profit that I'm going to make when I sell the lithograph. And the reason why I don't do weapons is because, first of all, you can see these rubrics are much more expensive, but also you need twice as many of them. So instead of only needing 5 Emirates for an accessory, for example, I need 10 rubrics for a weapon. So that's 180 Lucent that I need to subtract off the profit of any weapon lithograph that I'm going to sell. And I think a lot of people are not calculating this. I've even seen some YouTube guides recommending selling weapon lithographs, and frankly, it is almost never worth doing that. If I were to sell, for example, this heroic broadsword of the Resistance, after taxes, this 440 is only going to be about 340, and then if I subtract the cost of the rubrics on top of that, I'm only making 160 Lucent in profit. Now, this costs 50 ink instead of 25, like for an armor or an accessory, so I could sell 2 armors or 2 accessories for the same amount of ink. It's very easy for me right now to make over 160 Lucent in profit from selling 2 different armors or accessories. I mean, there's all kinds of options here. We'll go into some specifics in just a minute, but if we scroll past, we can see that there's still lots of armors. The really expensive ones are going to be the boss armors, but even among the non-boss armors, there's plenty of things still selling for 200, 300. Even after taxes, that's going to be a much better deal than selling those weapons that have that higher ink cost and that higher gem cost. A lot of you guys want me to give you a magic number on how much you should be lithographing items for. I can't do that. Every server is going to be different. Next week, the price is going to be different. Next month, the price is going to be different. The only way to do this, guys, is to just open up the market and scroll through this and learn what the economy looks like at the moment that you're trying to make money with your lithographs. Don't forget about blue lithographs as well. The same rule applies here when it comes to weapons. These are going to have a higher cost, so make sure you're factoring that in. But there are a lot of blue armors and accessories. For example, if I say that right now it's worth me lithoing a purple item for 300, all I need to do is divide that by 5 to see what my value is for a blue item. So I would divide 300 by 5, and that means any blue lithograph that I can sell for 60 is going to be worth it. The reason we divide by 5 is because blue lithographs take 5 times less ink, and they take the rare gems instead of the purple gems, which basically convert at a 5-to-1 ratio. So whatever you're doing your purples for, you can do your blues for 5 times less, and you're going to get about the same profit. So we've talked about how to sell the items and which items to sell. Let's talk about how you're going to get these items in the first place. And for that, the most important thing are these dimensional contract tokens and these abyssal contract tokens. If either one of these things is sitting there maxed out, that is the reason why you are broke. These are the most important resources that you have in the game. You're going to spend these whenever you do instance dungeons. You're going to spend these whenever you do the open world abyssal dungeons. And these 2 things are going to be the vast majority of all the loot that you get in the game, so you do not want to let them max out. Also, remember your contracts. You get 10 contracts that refresh every day. If those are maxed out, you're also going to be broke. You need those contract coins to make very important purchases, which are also going to help you to get more loot. So first of all, these mystic keys here, in addition to getting me trade stones, these are also going to get me abyssal contract tokens. That's going to be one of the sources for those. And then my trade extraction stones and my enchanted ink, we already talked about how the bulk of these are going to come from the contract merchant every week. And then I also want to be trying to buy these precious pouches every single day. In addition to a chance of loot from one of these, I'm also going to be getting blue contract scrolls. And blue contract scrolls are extremely important. You can also buy blue contract scrolls from the Sundries merchant once a week. This is a bundle that has 1 blue contract for each of the 4 level 50 abyssal dungeons. You can buy it 6 times for total of 24 contracts a week. If you're buying the Precious Blessing pouches from the other vendor once a day, those have 2 scrolls in them, so that's 14 a week. You combine those together, that's 38 blue scrolls a week. Guys, I don't care how bad your luck is. If you're running 38 blue scrolls a week, you're gonna get good stuff that is worth selling. In addition to that, those blue scrolls are each going to give you an Abyss currency. And when you save up 40 of those Abyss currencies, so you'll be able to do this at least once a week, since you're going to get 38 of these for free, and then you might get more from your green contracts. But at least 38 a week, so you're going to be able to go over to Sundry's Merchant and turn in 40 of these Abyss currency for one of these chests right here. Now, we already talked about how the weapons are generally not worth going for if you're going to litho. When it comes to trait extraction, remember that accessories and cloaks tend to be the most valuable. So if we just take a quick look at these, we can presume that the items that are going to have the best chance of making me money are going to be the Flame Wrought Bindings, the Ancient Tapestry Mantle, the Clasp of the Conqueror, and the Etched Alabaster Band. Now, if I really want to do my due diligence, I'm going to check those items on the market and kind of compare them against each other. Once you do this a few times, you'll start to memorize what are the highest performing items on your market. So for example, I already know that one of the best ones for me to check here is going to be Clasp of the Conqueror. I look at these extracts and I see, okay, so max health, skill damage boost, and buff duration all have a really good value here. I have about a 50-50 chance of getting something that's going to be worth 300 to 400 Lucent if I extract it. Now, if I get unlucky and I get one of these traits here that's not really valuable, then I also have the option of lithographing. And the lithograph for the Clasp is 209. This is probably a little bit less than what I would be willing to go for right now. So I would probably just end up extracting even the cheaper ones and selling them. But just keep in mind, when you're choosing these items, you want to look at both of the extracts and the lithographs. So I could do the same thing now for the Etched Alabaster Band and see, okay, the traits here are worth a little bit less than the Clasp, and the litho is about the same. So I'll just go for the Clasp instead. If I wanted to, I could go through and I could check the rest of the items that are available here, but you get the idea. There's also a box that spins 2 of these plus 10 Abyssal Aggregate. These Abyssal Aggregate have a cost of their own, so you would need to subtract this from whatever profit you're making. But some of the items in here tend to be very valuable. Shadow Harvester Tunic, Shock Commander Plate, Sabatons of the Field General. I mean, really any of these items tend to have more value, but at least on my server, those 3 tend to stand out the most. Probably the Shock Commander Plate being the best one on average. But again, you just want to open up the market and get to know what these things are actually worth. You can do something similar with these special resistance medals. You're going to get these from just showing up to a field boss or any of the level 45 to 50-ish events. You do not have to do the entire event to get these medals. You can literally just show up in the last 2 minutes, contribute a few points, and get credits. Just pick whatever the highest level piece or co-op event is. That way you don't have to worry about getting ganked on the way to the tournament or anything like that. So in this case, for Talisman Delivery, I would just make sure that I showed up with enough time to run over and claim one of the posts that I need to turn in the event, and then I would get that special resistance medal. Same thing if like Requiem or Fire Festival are up and running. Those are very easy. Literally takes 30 seconds. You just show up, you kill a skeleton or an orc, you turn it in for 1 point, and then you get a special resistance medal when the event ends. Now, these special resistance medals are going to be able to be turned in to resistance lithographs, and basically any item that has the name resistance in it can be used here. So the easiest way to know which one to make is, of course, to go back into the auction house, go to the lithograph section, and just type the word resistance. I'm going to scroll past the weapons for the reasons we already discussed earlier and just see, okay, so it looks like the hood is 300 plus, the tunic is about 300, and then anything else, looks like those 2 are kind of the winners. Okay, and the shoes. So I would check those 3 because they're all about 300 or a little bit over 300. I would then go through and check the traits on those items as well to make sure, okay, well, maybe one of these, the lithograph is a little higher, but on another one, the traits could be higher. So I just kind of want to take a look at the top 3 or 4 items here and see which ones have the best lithos, which ones have the best trait extraction potential, and then that's where I'm going to spend my medals. I will get a special resistance medal from those events and also just from showing up and hitting a field boss. I only have to hit the field boss once to get the participation box. So If you're showing up to events and field bosses, you can get anywhere from 2 to, like 10 of these medals a day if you're playing a lot and going to a lot of events. And each time you save up 40 of those, that's a potential 200-300 Lucent that you can get for very little effort. The next currency that we need to look at is the dimensional shards that we get from running instance dungeons. You can spend 80 of these to target one of the dungeon specific chests. Generally, this is not going to be worth it though. What we want to look at instead is the dimensional essence chests. And the way that I get these dimensional essences is I go over to the accessory crafter and I find the dimensional essence recipe and I spend 10 of each shard that I'm getting from my dungeons. I can also use those selection chests that you get either from the battle pass, or you can also get these consistently from choosing the random dungeon queue. So make sure you're always doing that. When you queue up for your dungeons, you want to make sure that you are doing a random matchmaking so that you can get that bonus chest. Some of you guys are going to be reluctant to do this because you're like, well, I really need an item from Death's Abyss, and so I'm going to run Death's Abyss over and over again. I'm reluctant to recommend this, but at the moment, you can just queue up for a random dungeon, and if it pops one that you don't want to do, you can simply reject it and wait for another dungeon to come. This is a little bit obnoxious, but if you just reject it and then wait 15 seconds for that queue to fill and then queue up again, then it's far less obnoxious. Please just don't be one of those people who clicks reject over and over and over again and just makes the whole queue take longer. That doesn't help you, that doesn't help anyone else, so don't be that guy. But using the random queue in order to get these extra shards is just super worth it. I would consider this mandatory, and this box even has a chance to get a entire dimensional essence, which is like getting 60 shards worth of value. So it's extremely good. You really can't pass it up. And we're going to be using those dimensional essences to get one of these two chests. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't really take long to figure out which of these is going to be more worthwhile. There's 2 rings here. Both of these rings are very popular. All of the armors from this chest are popular. You're just going to have to, again, look at the prices on your market, get to know these 6 items, and decide which one's going to be the best. Typically, it's the Plate of the Field General, the Shadow Harvester grips, or the Swirling Essence shoes. But, in your market, it might be different. So just do the due diligence, get to know these items on your server. And once you do that, you'll be able to pull in a lot of extra Lucent every week from those dimensional essences that you're getting from running your dungeons. Don't forget that you can also exchange 2 of these dimensional essences for one of the purple weapons that drops from instance dungeons, such as Duke Magnas or Carnixes and so on. So if you have not gotten lucky and gotten your drop from those instance dungeons, this is an option that you can go for first before you start using it for money making. You can't litho these dungeon weapons, so this won't be an option for making Lucent, but it might be something that you want to do just to get your gear before you start spending these on rings or armors to sell on the market. Another currency to keep an eye on is this arena coin. We can get this every week from arena victories. If I do all 10 of these, I'm going to get a total of 6 coins. And I can spend 9 of these to get a bracelet or 3 of these to get a precious pouch. So I have to decide, am I getting 3 times more value out of this bracelet than I would out of the pouch? And to be honest, it's usually kind of a gamble. So if I search skillful, I can see all of these arena bracelets. And if we look at the traits, usually half of them have a pretty good value and the other half do not. And so if I were to get unlucky and I get health regen, then this is probably, it's barely even worth extracting. These cannot be lithographed, so if you get unlucky, then it is what it is. There's no litho option. You have to extract the trait if you want to make any money off of these. So I just kind of go through and see which one looks to be the most popular. In this case, this bracelet here that says it's selling for 800 for debuff duration, this is quite a bit higher than all the other bracelets, so I would be suspicious that it's actually going for this much. It might be the case that just nobody has corrected this market yet, but you could try it if you wanted to take a gamble. But for the most part, I would look at these prices and say, okay, it looks like 300-400 for the more popular ones. I'd probably go for either the charging or the shock bracelet and hope that I get lucky with max health, skill damage, or debuff. And then if I get health regen, I probably just wouldn't even bother extracting it at all, since the ratio of stones to Lucent is too low here. I could instead get 3 of those pouches. That's going to give me 6 blue contracts, and remember, each of those blue contracts, in addition to giving me contract coins, also has a chance to give me purple loot, so maybe that's a better value. It's going to be kind of up to you to decide whether or not you want to take the bracelet gamble or the pouch gamble. One other shop to keep an eye on is the Guild Merchant Shop. I would probably prioritize the crystals and the trait conversion stones before doing this, but you can use your extra guild coins to also buy these rare weapon selection chests, and you can, about 2/3 of the time, you're going to get hit chance, heavy attack, or crit from this. Max health can sell, and even some of the junk traits sometimes sell in these as well, because people will use them to stack blessing. So any extra guild coins that you have, this is going to vary from person to person, kind of based on like how active your guild is. But just remember to do things like your guild donations every day to get more coins from that. And then as you stockpile extra coins periodically, you can come in and buy these chests in order to extract the traits or in order to use the traits yourselves. Speaking of stacking blessing, this is a system that's going to be very important for you to understand if you want to be smart with your money. Part of being wealthy is making money, but part of being wealthy is also saving money. And if you want to save a ton of money when upgrading your gear, you need to understand how the blessing system works. I have a whole video guide on this. It's way too long to go into now, but on some of my pieces of gear, I've been able to beat the market value of these traits by over 50%, meaning I spent half as much money as everyone else is spending to get some of these pieces upgraded. That is going to be huge when you've got pieces of gear that cost thousands of Lucent, especially when you're accumulating that savings over 11 different pieces of gear. Some other just general market tips. As a seller, you want to try your best to list things during prime time or on the weekend. Obviously, if it's like a Monday and you need to sell something, don't wait all the way until Friday, because the prices could come down during that time period. But if you have the choice, usually you can get a little bit more money selling things when the population is higher. So if you're selling something at 3 in the morning, it's not going to sell as well as it would at 5 p.m. or 7 p.m. And this is especially true for traits, because when people sell traits, they tend to sell them one at a time. But when people buy traits, they tend to buy multiples at a time, especially if those are blue traits. Sometimes people will go in and buy 10 or 20 blue traits simultaneously. And so if several different people are doing that at once, then the price of that trait can spike. And that's a lot more likely to happen when higher numbers of people are online. Another tip is that if you listed an item and it has been up for a few hours and it has not sold, you probably need to take that item down and reduce the price because somebody has undercut you. Obviously, this doesn't apply for things that are already sitting at 10 Lucent. You kind of just have to let those expire and then relist them if they didn't go through the first time. But if I'm selling something for 20 and 4 hours later it still hasn't sold, probably someone else is selling it for 19 or 18 or 17, and I need to go and undercut that person before the price gets even lower. Usually that happens because you've listed something right after the price has spiked and the market is now correcting it back down to what it normally sells for. So this is another thing that kind of comes with practice. You're going to notice that some items look like they are more expensive than they should be. And if that is the case, you might need to cut by more than 1 Lucent. So a really good example of this, just the other day on stream, I was trying to sell this plate of the Field General Lithograph, and at the time it was listed for like 700. I was familiar with this item and I knew that the real price was usually around 300 to 350 Lucent. And so when I saw that it was selling for 700, really what that means is that there were a few people simultaneously who needed to buy this on like a Saturday night. And so the price temporarily jumped up to 700. I tried to sell this for like 680 and it did not work. Someone undercut me, and then by the time I actually sold it, it was only worth 289. So the smarter strategy there would have been, okay, I know that this item is not actually worth 700 Lucent, but since that is what is currently listed, I'm going to price it for 600 Lucent. That way it still looks very discounted compared to what else is on the market, but I'm still getting a larger cut than what I would if I sell it at its actual price. So in that case, I made a mistake. I didn't cut as deeply as I should have. And as a result, that item was not appealing enough to sell within that time period. I ended up making a mistake of going to bed without relisting it. And then I woke up in the morning and of course the price had dropped in half. And so I ended up only being able to sell it for 289. And so, you might be wondering, okay, well, how do I know if that item is in the middle of a price spike? How do I know if it's in the middle of a correction? And the only answer to that is just practice. You just have to get used to being in the market, searching these items, and the more you play and the more items you sell, the more of these patterns you're going to notice. Another mistake that I see people sometimes making with lithographs is they sell them in stacks of 2. When I'm buying this item, there's no way for me to split this stack. And since I'm not playing a character with 4 legs, I probably don't need 2 pairs of boots. So there's no reason for me to buy this. I'm just going to go and get the one that's in a stack of 1. So if you're selling your lithographs, if this usually only happens with blues, but if somehow you have a stack of multiple of the same lithograph, make sure you're listing those in stacks of 1. One more money-making tip for you guys, but this time instead of Lucent, we're going to talk about SOLLANT. A lot of you want to know how I got this much. The answer is very simple. Anytime I am running an Abyssal dungeon, I have either crab meat pie or steamed bird egg running. Steamed bird egg is the easiest one to make. This only requires a few levels in cooking. Once you get your cooking a little bit higher, you'll run the crab meat pie instead for the Abyssal contract token efficiency. You can farm this crab meat over at Daybreak Shore from killing the crabs whenever it's raining. And I just always have this on. The majority of the SOLLANT that you make in the game comes from Abyssal grinding. So anytime I'm Abyssal grinding, I get 50% more SOLLANT, and that's really all it takes to rake in tons of SOLLANT in this game. So putting all this together, here's kind of like an estimated tally of what I think I'm going to make in the upcoming week based on the current prices. This is a low estimate here. I could easily make more than this if I just get a handful of lucky drops. And when you're doing this many runs, all these different dungeons, all these different contracts, everything else, I'm going to be getting tons of blue items. Some of those are only going to sell for 10, but some of them will be selling for 20 or even 30, 40, 50. Same with purple items. Some of those purple items might only sell for 50 or 60, but I'm going to get at least a few that sell for 200, 300, 400. It's going to fluctuate from week to week, and the longer the game is out, the lower these prices are going to get. But even now, there are plenty of opportunities to make money in the game. And as you can see, it's really not just one thing. It's all of these different activities that you're doing that are adding together to create that total. If you're consistent and you're playing a lot, and if you combine that with smart strategies when it comes to upgrading your gear, then you're going to be able to max out in no time. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. Please like, share the video, subscribe. And if you really found this video helpful, then consider subscribing over on Twitch or clicking the join button down below and becoming a channel member and supporting me directly. And then that will give me the opportunity to put out even more of this content. Don't forget that I'm streaming all the time on both YouTube and Twitch. Thank you guys so much for your support. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you again very soon.